Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to our Zoom community gathering. We are lucky to have Preston Barker from Team Rubicon with us here. We have so many vegetation issues around neighborhoods. Some people have them in their own backyard or the neighbor's property. They don't know what to do about it. And we hope to learn from Preston how to manage it, how to make a plan, and hopefully get some of it done on May 7th. Preston, please.
Awesome, thank you. So I'm going to, it looks like participant sharing's been disabled. Do you mind if I screen share?
Okay, let me do it. Hold on a second. Okay, you should be able to do it now. By the way, feel free to introduce yourself.
Yeah, that's actually part of the presentation. Yeah, just give me one second. Let me get this slide pulled up. Are you guys able to see this here?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, and you can still see it?
Yep.
Awesome. All right, so I recently attended the Wildland Urban Interface Conference hosted by the International Association of Fire Chiefs in Reno, Nevada. So we're going to kind of talk about the takeaways from that. We're going to start out. I'm going to introduce myself, give you guys a little bit of my background. We're going to talk about what WUI is. WUI is Wildland Urban Interface. Then we're going to look at what's new in WUI. And after that, we'll talk about how Team Rubicon can, possibly help you guys. And then I'll open it up to questions as well as just discussion. If you guys do have a question during the middle of the presentation, I ask that you write it down or throw it in the chat. I'll try to monitor it, but I'm doing presentation view, so I can't really see the chat too much. And then I may ask for your participation. So if I do, I will try and jump out and take a look at the chat box. So about me, my name is Preston Barker. I've been a gray shirt since 2016. Gray shirt's just the color of shirt we wear. That's how we refer to our volunteers. I've done quite a few things with Team Rubicon. Most notably, I've been part of the COVID response. I was the logistics section chief for the Federal Medical Station in Santa Clara, California. I also helped pilot the mobile testing program we did in partnership with Verily. Recently, I stepped out of my membership role and moved into an administrator role here for Northern California. So Northern California is broken down into small metros as part of our resilient city strategy. It's basically decentralized leadership that allows an area to respond to localized events much quicker than a national organization might take. So I oversee those metros. I did serve in the Marine Corps from 2009 to 2015. I was an infantryman and then a motor transport operator, where I led large-scale logistics for several units, moving 200 Marines at a time from one place to another. And then since 2017, I've been a wildland firefighter with the U.S. Forest Service, as well as a firefighter EMT with a volunteer department here in Solano County. I've taken part in some big campaign fires, including the LNU complex that occurred in 2020. So what is WUI? You guys can read the definition here, but basically WUI is a transition from nature into where we live. WUI is a little bit different in each area. Some places WUI is very defined, such as like somewhere like San Francisco, right? Golden Gate Park. It's the boundaries between Golden Gate Park and the surrounding urban environment are very definitive. If you go somewhere like Truckee or Lake Tahoe, where the communities are kind of mixed in with the wildland environment, it's a little different. So you guys, when you look at the definition of WUI, you kind of have to look at your area specifically and say, okay, hey, are we kind of a mixed area, or is it very defined? You guys can see here, the WUI is pretty expansive. There's a lot of communities that reside in the WUI, and many are very unaware. The WUI grows each year pretty exponentially. So it's important to be mindful as your community grows, what impact are you having with that growth? So on the left, you can see the top 5 states with homes in the WUI, California leading the way. On the right, a really interesting map I thought was cool. So some of those states with the blue actually have really much smaller populations, like Montana is probably one of my favorite there. Fewer homes, but the majority of their homes reside in the wildland urban interface environment, and that puts them at greater risk, right? So a wildfire in Montana is almost more disastrous than one in California, simply because they have most of their residents residing there, between 60 and 80%, which is pretty significant. In California, we're on the lower end, between 30 and 45%, and many of those residents are unaware that they live in such an environment. So you guys, stepping up and recognizing that and creating, this group is the first step in acknowledging that, hey, we need to be more cognizant of where we live. On the left, it talks about suppression costs. And when you talk about the cost of a wildfire, there's two costs there. You have the annual, you have the suppression cost, but then you also have the cost of the fire itself, the damage afterwards. And that's both tangible and intangible losses, economic losses over time, taxes, but also the real property, such as homes destroyed. You guys can see on the right there, the 2018 study of the Camp Fire. It was a pretty significant fire relative to, how many homes were actually lost and whatnot. And back over to the left, if you guys see, over time, the cost of suppressing fires has increased. So what we're finding is it's actually better return on investment if we do what we can to prevent a wildfire versus trying to put one out. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure in this case. 2021, the wildfire season was from January 14th to December 16th. There were over 8,600 fires. You guys can see the large amount of, devastation caused by that, as far as acreage and buildings destroyed. Really interesting to note the cost estimate for California, between $45 and $55 billion. The total cost for the US of wildfires in 2021 was between 70 and 90 billion. So California had over 50% of that cost, which is pretty significant. California is one of the few states that actually brings firefighters in from other countries to help us fight our wildfires, including Canada and Australia. Three notable fires there are the Dixie, Monument, and the Caldor fires. Between the three of them, it was over $1 billion in just suppression alone. So now we're going to talk about what's new in the WUI. We're going to look at 5 things. New policy called Outthink Wildfire. There's a public education. We're going to go over community engagement, trainings and certifications you guys could look at, and then codes and standards. So Outthink Wildfire, it's a comprehensive strategy that was developed by the Nfpa, which is it's a nonprofit organization. They're a non-governmental body, and what they do is make recommendations for standards in firefighting and structures, the National Electric Code. Basically, all their standards are, in essence, about life safety. So a lot of these standards you will see adopted by other organizations, such as CAL FIRE, or even the building code in California. There's 7A, which addresses exterior home construction and materials as it relates to wildfire exposure. Come from the Nfpa recommendations, and you can adopt them as they are, or sometimes we go beyond. In California, we tend to go beyond, and we're a little more stringent with that. So anytime you guys see something from the Nfpa, just remember it's a recommendation, kind of a guideline. It's not necessarily the law. What you need to do is look and see what laws your local authority has adopted or what the state has adopted. Outthink Wildfire it's rooted in 2 realities. Wildfires are going to happen. We're not going to prevent them. It's just, it's the nature of things. Wildfires have been happening for, since the dawn of time. And the reality is the fire service isn't always going to be able to save every structure in the path of wildfire. So your goal is to make your home as hardened and resilient as possible by providing defensible space, making it so, that structure, wildfire can't really get up to your structure. And if it does, your structure is able to resist that fire. As a firefighter myself, I've been to homes where we look at it, and unfortunately we know we can't defend that house based on the way the fire's behaving. So we have to go somewhere else where we know we can defend it, because at the end of the day, we're not going to, risk our lives to save a structure. We'll risk our lives for, another human life. That's what we like to say. You risk a lot to save a life. You risk a little to save a little. And in this case, property tends to be a little for us. So, in some cases, such as the LNU fire, I found myself in the first probably 12 hours of that fire simply evacuating residents. We didn't have the resources or the ability to fight the fire. There were structures that survived, and those were, properties where the homeowners took the time to say, okay, what can I do to protect my home? So there's 5 tenets to this. The big ones you guys, want to look at for you would be retrofitting your homes and your communities, looking at landscape management, and then public education. Those are the 3 big ones that are really going to benefit you guys. Over here, we have some policy updates by state. I'm only going to cover California. So right now, California has a collaborative effort between the Department of Insurance, CAL FIRE, and Cal OES called Safer from Wildfires. It's a program that's basically designed to help you with home hardening, defensible space. They've got some grants going into that. And through that program, if you complete their program, you get a certification, and it allows you to either maintain insurance, because in some areas people are being dropped just due to the how prone their area is to wildfire, or get a discount on your insurance. Right now, there's approximately 13 companies participating in that program, which is about 40% of the insurance market in California. And it's currently being piloted. So once this program has been proven, you'll likely see better participation. So once you guys do get the work done, I would encourage you to approach your insurance agent and or even shop around and say, hey, can we get better deals because we've done all this work? The insurance companies love to see that. I at WUI got to talk to one of the chief engineers from the IBHS, which is the Insurance Institute for Building and Home Safety. And that's they're funded by the insurance companies to look at how they can make homes safer. So they're willing to give you a discount if you're willing to put in the work to make your home safer. There's also some federal programs out there. The Forest Service has kind of adjusted their management. There's a bunch of legislature that's come out. That's pretty important. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act has put a lot of money into grants, including the FEMA BRIC program, building resiliency in infrastructure and communities. I can't remember, I don't have it in my notes here, the amount, but it's pretty significant. One of the programs is the Community Wildfire Protection Plans. Right now, I believe it's up to $250,000 available to develop those plans. And then around $10 million, the cap is $10 million in order to execute those plans. That's typically reserved for government entities. However, it's possible that you guys could pursue those as well, depending on how large your community is. So as far as public education goes, FireWise was launched in 2002. It's a recognition program that allows your community to get organized and receive recognition for that. Currently, California leads the way with FireWise programs or communities. I believe there's 513, which is pretty cool. FireWise communities are really active. It's what we like about them. In 2021, they put in 2 million hours of volunteer hours in order to get work done. There's about $133 million in vegetation reduction, fuel reduction that happened. And it was like almost 2.5 million cubic yards of material that was removed. In terms of those hours that were donated, that's usually one of the requirements for a lot of the grants, and we'll talk about it later, but that's kind of one of the ways in which TR can help. Then there's also wildfire research that's being conducted by like the IBHS, and it's in partnership with the Forest Service and NIST. They've created a program called Wildfire Prepared. It's also being piloted here in California. And that is another one of those grant programs that is focused more on home hardening. A lot of residents that are aware of wildfire mitigation tend to focus on the HIZ or the home ignition zone. They look at that defensible space, 0 to 5, 5 to 30, and then 30 to 100 feet around their home. However, oftentimes you can have defensible space, but if your home is not resistant to things like embers that can travel up to a mile away, your home still may not survive a fire. So home hardening is kind of the new focus. And then there's the wildfire assessment program. That was a joint effort between the U.S. Forest Service and the National Volunteer Fire Council. The program is free to the public. You can go in there and do your research. It's similar to the Certified Wildfire Mitigation Specialist and HIZ training that you'll find with the Nfpa. However, through the Nfpa, you do have to pay for that training. So looking at this program might be something that your community might want to consider. So community engagement, I want to cover a few things, but first I want to talk about how the conference went. So basically there were a lot of people like yourselves, like just getting into wildfire mitigation. We had government employees, basically non-operational fire personnel that had no background. So for the conference, they did a pre-conference 2-day seminar where they kind of taught people more about WUI and what it was. And there were quite a few surveys conducted. 80% of the attendants were just starting to implement their plan, right? Just like you guys, right? Just starting. So really fast, we're going to get to that participation part. I want you guys to think right now about barriers you might encounter. Think about the number one barrier, because that was one of the questions that we asked the participants. And I want you guys to drop it in the chat. What do you think is going to be the number one barrier you guys are going to run into when trying to create or implement an effective plan? Move this out of the way. All right, I'll give you guys one more minute. Okay, let's go over it. We've got cost, resistance of residents, consensus, which is very similar. Another funding, residents not being willing or informed, lack of coordination between jurisdictions. All right, so the four barriers reported by the attendees were processes and red tapes. So a lot of bureaucracy by their organizations, community acceptance of mitigation. So you need buy-in from all the stakeholders. Every homeowner needs to buy in. There's something called shared risk. Just because you, get your home ready for a wildfire, if your neighbor doesn't have anything ready at all, there's a potential that the fire from their home will spill over to yours. Then there were vulnerable communities. So a lot of at-risk populations, people who, lack mobility, older communities that can't get out and do the work themselves, or maybe they don't have access to funding. They can't pay for the work themselves. And then the last one reported was difficulties collaborating and prioritizing. So there's a lot of organizations that come together. And when you guys are working with them, you want to make sure that you guys have a really good relationship as you collaborate, and then prioritize the work that you need to do. You guys need to agree on what's most important for your community, what's going to have the biggest impact, and get that done first. Of the participants, the three programs they were participating in most were the FireWise that I just mentioned, National Ready, Set, Go, which is a FEMA program, chipping grants, other funds available through them, and then Fire Adapted Communities. If you guys haven't heard of Fire Adapted Communities, it's another great resource. They have something called FACnet, and it is probably one of the best resources right now for you guys to find information in regards to mitigation and home hardening. I myself, as well as some of my colleagues in Team Rubicon, love FACnet. They're a great resource. I got to see them present at the conference, and it was just incredible. They do a lot of research into wildfire mitigation. They've even studied the campfire afterwards. They were recently in Grand, Colorado. They had the giant fire there that took out, I want to say 1,200 homes, and it was only a 1,600 acre fire. So it was pretty significant. Thank you, Marilyn. Next, we looked at the programs they were more interested in. So wildfire research, the community planning, community planning assistance for wildfires was something that was presented. That's something I recommend you guys look into. They can assist you guys with getting the plans written. FireSafe, also the California FireSafe website, also has a really great resources, 12 pages, and they talk about the process of developing a community wildfire protection plan, as well as some examples from recent wildfire plans that were developed, such as like Humboldt, which I think was developed in 2019. The groups that, like I mentioned, there were some government entities that were just getting involved. So the groups that they worked with the most were HOAs and resident groups. So you guys are the groups they were working with the most. They also worked with local fire departments and state forest service. However, the community is the best resource when engaging for these mitigation efforts and home hardening efforts. No one cares more about your home than you do. So make sure you guys are engaging with your local government. And then looking at the communities, I don't know how much this will describe your community, but you guys can think about it. So within the last 12 months, 80% reported an increase in wildfire threats. I'm sure we all feel that here in California. Within the last 12 months, 52% were affected by wildfires. I believe Pam had mentioned her house being up on the hill and having a fire there, last year. 52% lacked community awareness and mitigation best practices. That doesn't mean their community wasn't aware of the need for fire mitigation, but they weren't educated on what the best practices were for their home and their space specifically. A lot of times when you look at fire mitigation, there are different types of fuels. We have something called light flashy fuels, such as grasses, that tend to burn really quick. They don't burn too hot, but the fires move very fast through them. Then we have some of the more denser fuels, things like chaparral and bushes. They tend to burn a lot hotter. They take a little bit longer to catch fire. Once they do, they're going to burn a little bit longer. They do still spread pretty fast. And then we have something bigger, like our 1,000-hour fuels. So large trees, things that definitely take time to catch fire. But honestly, once they're on fire, there's not a whole lot we can do to put them out. We just kind of have to let them burn. And then 52% of the communities reported high elderly populations. So another thing to think about in your community, maybe you guys don't have people that have joined this program, but it still might be helpful to go out and engage them and help them. Maybe they don't want to participate, but again, there's some shared risk there. If they don't have the means, whether it be physically to get out and do the work or the funds to do the work, if you guys can find a way to help them with partner organizations such as Team Rubicon, to get that work done, it's going to reduce your shared risk and hopefully protect the community as a whole. I see a post on the Contra Costa Community Wildfire Protection Plan. So the cities and counties often put those together. There's nothing saying you guys also can't develop your own that's very specific to your community. And something to look into. You guys could also, though, go off of the plan provided by your county. All right. And then some of the takeaways that the residents had participants had was networking and learning from their fellow attendees and getting their mitigation action plans put together. So in the future, I would encourage you guys to look for these conferences. Whether you're able to attend virtually. I know there's one coming up in San Diego next month. I can try and get Sohaila the information for that. It's a free conference, great information that's available. I really enjoy it because it's California. And there are very specific things here in California. Earlier I had some information about some of the other states that's not necessarily applicable to this group, but interesting to note, places like Colorado are under local control, meaning the state cannot force the cities or counties to adopt regulations. It has to be done at the local level, which goes back to that frustration of buy-in from residents in the local community. It can get very political in places like that. And so my partners in Team Rubicon struggle to get the buy-in needed to help get these mitigation plans executed. All right. So community wildfire community preparedness day is coming up. Started in 2014. It's basically just a call to action here in the US and Canada, first Saturday in May. And it's just to get you guys as a community to come together and engage and get stuff done. This year, COVID, is kind of relaxed, but there's still places in which gatherings are limited or still not allowed. So they've been encouraging people to kind of look around their home specifically and what can they do at their home. State Farm partners with the Nfpa to get this program done. They have a $500 grant that they give out. They give out 100 of those to different communities across the US. So next year, you guys might be able to apply for that since you guys are organizing now. But it'd be a great opportunity for you guys to get, funding for some of the projects you guys have. For anyone who's really interested in getting serious about wildfire mitigation, the Nfpa has a course a test that you take, and then you do, there's some steps you have to take. So you take this test, and if you don't have foundational knowledge on wildfires or fire mitigation, they provide the material there. Once you take the test, which is $350 take it at a national testing center, you can then go and conduct 4 home assessments. Once those home assessments are completed, you send those in to the Nfpa, and if everything looks good, they certify you. That's super helpful because sometimes when you're talking to insurance and other agencies, they really like to see that when you guys have done these. It might be helpful for one person in your community to look into this. I myself am looking into it as well, just for the benefit of my community here in Vacaville. We have 125 square miles of response area in our district. And we have a lot of residents that live in the WUI. I would say probably 95% of our residents. So just something to consider. And the last section we're going to look at, codes and standards, NFPA 1140. So that's one of their standards that I mentioned, the recommendations. They used to have 4 standards that covered wildfire. NFPA 1140 is a consolidation of all 4 of those standards into one. The 2022 edition has everything you'll need from fire protection, management practices and policies, methods for assessing your fire ignition hazards. And you guys can get a hold of this through NFPA link. It's a $99 a year subscription, but it's available to you on your phone, your tablet, your computer at any time. You can also purchase a paper back copy, and they mail that to you as well. It's a little more expensive, but it's something to consider and look into. All right, so coming into how Team Rubicon can help, I did see a question from Cliff on what is Team Rubicon. So I'm guessing you weren't here for our last presentation, but Team Rubicon is a national disaster response group. So we go into communities after disasters, and we kind of help them recover. Sometimes first responders are really overwhelmed, or the community is not prepared for the size and scope of the disaster. So we're able to help in quite a few ways. Some of our all hazard services and capabilities include incident management, site surveys and damage assessments. We do work orders for those. We're then able to push those out to our teams who conduct the work. We can do hazard mitigation, debris management, home repair, medical support, and then also volunteer management. We often find after a disaster, there are a lot of people that want to come out and help, but don't know how. So we kind of fold them into our ranks and give them direction and get them working. And then on the international side, we do debris management and primary care for medical. Most notably right now would be Ukraine. We have medical teams providing aid to refugees in Europe, as well as training Ukrainian first responders on how to do mass casualties, since many of our volunteers are veterans or first responders. Moving into how Team Rubicon can help you guys with mitigation. So some of our mitigation capabilities are fuel modifications. So we can look at, what you guys have in your plans and help you execute that. Defensible space clearing, home ignition zone. So defensible space, you guys might have shared community areas that need to be cleared out, and one person can't do it on their own, or maybe even too big for your whole community. So if we can come out and help you guys get that cleared out. Sohaila mentioned, the possible, access to a chipper, which is really helpful. We also do creek and culvert clearing and repair. That's super important. One, because these dry creek beds in the summer, the seasonal creek beds can, in the winter, it's a riparian area. So basically it's an area that, you'll see a lot of growth of plants and animals, and they're really beautiful areas. But in the summer, all of that dries up and you just have a really dense fuel load. So getting that cleared out. But also after a fire season, it's important to make sure that those areas are maintained, because after a wildfire, the root systems in a lot of plants are damaged or destroyed. What that means is when the rains come down, those roots are no longer there to hold that land together. So what you can find is landslides as well as flooding. So, we also can assist with sandbagging after wildfires as well to help kind of prevent some of that damage that might occur. Here's a bunch of links. I can get these for you guys, but basically these are all the different programs I've talked about, different places where you can find information. The International Association of Fire Chiefs, their Wildland Urban Interface Conference has been held every year in Reno. They've already announced the 2023 schedule. But like I mentioned, there are a few other conferences coming up in the West Coast that you guys might look forward and attend, even if virtually. I want to thank you guys and open it up to any questions anyone might have.
Thank you very much, Preston. I appreciate it. I have some questions, but let me see if there are questions from other people. No? Okay. I start. So the main question actually is, you said you could help. Oh, Pam, go ahead. Sorry.
All right, it just took me a while to find the button. So Preston, I understand that we need to operate as communities. So within our community, we have many communities. So what kind of size do you want of a group to be considered for it to make sense for you to come in and work with that group?
It really depends on the work that needs to be done. So, and actually, I'm going to answer Vika's question and your question at the same time. So we are funded by donors. We're a nonprofit. Almost all of our money, comes from individuals. We have some organizations that donate to us as well, but we have some very wealthy philanthropists that donate to us. But a lot of it, we have a saying in our organization is your mom's a donor. People go to our website when a disaster hits and they donate, $5, $10, $20. But however, across the US that adds up. And so when we conduct an operation, because it's at no cost to the resident, we have to think about that operation or that service project and the impact it's going to have because of our funding source. If we come out to a property and it's going to cost us, let's say $500 for the day for us to come out there, which isn't a whole lot of money. But the work we get done is going to, save your home from being burned down. There's a huge wildfire threat in your area. I can justify that. If it's going to cost us a little more money, then we like to maybe wrap a few more homes into the plan there. Also, I have to look at, bringing my volunteers out. I'm asking them to volunteer their time, right? Every one of our volunteers is unpaid. Across our organization, we have 150,000 volunteers in the US. We only have 177 paid staff. So that tells you guys right there, all of our money goes into these operations and getting, disaster work done. On top of that, we don't just do fire mitigation, right? So in this southern US, we respond to a lot of hurricanes and tornadoes in the Midwest, flooding all across the US, most notably right now in British Columbia, Canada. We're responding to flooding that happened there recently from some atmospheric storms, rivers that hit them. So I can't give you the definitive answer of like how big. What you would have to do is figure out what you want done, get that together, and then you guys reach out to us to say, hey, can you guys come out and take a look at this? There's a gentleman, Norman Corson. He's our field operations lead. Norman is the one that I would put you guys in touch with. And Sohaila, I'll get his email to you. Let's see, Judy, can residents apply directly or does the application need to come from the community? So you can put in a request for assistance through our national website. However, sometimes that can be slow and those emails get lost at times because it goes to like a general email inbox and then they have to figure out who to forward it to. So my recommendation would be to go through your organization when you have that request for assistance. And the best place for you guys to start is going to be with that, your mitigation plan, doing your own, like I said, your own wildfire protection plan is the best idea. Or even just, you don't have to go that, strict with it and having a written document, but just going out and, like I said, prioritizing the work in your community. As you guys have your next meeting, say, hey, okay, here's the hazards we've identified in our community. What's going to take precedence? And then, then approaching us and saying, hey guys, we figured out the work we need done. And then we can come out and figure out what it's going to take to get that done. And if we can do it, I do want to stress that I cannot promise you guys we can come out for every single thing. Sometimes events come up and our resources get diverted. So, if we aren't able to come out and fulfill your request, it's, not that we don't want to help you. It's just sometimes that we can't. This last year we had flooding up in, was it Shasta Trinity area? One of the water plants that fed the community was threatened. And we were ready to go, boots on the ground, and literally got told, hey, you got to stand down and go home, because we had, stuff kick off in Kentucky. Same thing happened to me in actually Nevada County in January of this year. The tornadoes that wiped out 3 towns in Kentucky. I was needing Sawyers to help in Nevada County after a giant winter storm. And unfortunately, I could not get the Sawyers flown in simply because the need was there in Kentucky. So that being said, it also, you guys have to look at the time frame of the work we're conducting. So if we're doing things like mechanical thinning of vegetation, running a hot chainsaw in drive, vegetation around your homes isn't, always a good idea. So we want to make sure we're planning this at the right time of year. We don't mind getting out there when it's cold and wet in the winter and doing this work. It's a really good time to get it done. But just making sure that, we're not in the peak of wildfire season and we're out there trying to, do some mechanical thinning that maybe could wait till the winter. That's not to say there isn't stuff that needs to be done during that time, but just making sure that, the risk, the risk outweighs the reward outweighs the risk, excuse me. Is there any other questions?
Marilyn, go ahead, please. Let Marilyn ask her question. Then I see there are some more questions in the chat. You can answer those too. Go ahead, Marilyn, please. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah. I have a question about whether you can do assessments that help guide jurisdictions on what they should do for vegetation mitigation. We actually have a problem where we know what the best practice is, but I think our public works needs guidance on what they should do to reduce. There's a lot of steep open space that they do not manage at all, or they don't know what to do. And I honestly think they don't know what to do is a big piece of it. And I'm wondering about coming out and assessing this and letting them know what the best practices would be.
As an organization, can we do that? I show up on disaster operations and go to a county emergency operations center and talk to the incident commander and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing on the ground. This is what we think you guys should do. This is how we're willing to help. Whether or not they execute that way or let us, go out and do, what we recommend. I can't force the jurisdictions having authority. That's what we call it, AHJ. Authority having jurisdiction. I can't, make them, or even if I pass on my recommendation, I would recommend is you in the community, maybe, rattling some cages. The squeaky wheel tends to get the grease. But definitely coming out with a recommendation, when you guys have those issues. If you're talking about steep terrain, I've been on fires where we won't even cut line in certain terrain because it's just too dangerous. But that's when you look at things like, animal husbandry. Goats are a great option.
Yes.
Goats and sheep. But oftentimes their first question is like, well, where the heck are we going to get goats? Right. So making sure you do that research and being able to present that to them. The other issue you have to remember is how they're funded and getting these grants. There are timelines in which they have to apply, and then the funding itself for them. If that's not included in their budget and they don't have any wiggle room, they may not be able to execute that this year. That's more of a political issue that I can speak to as a firefighter. I mean, I struggle to get my chief to do things I know we should be doing. And that's from my experience as a wildfire with the Forest Service. But my chief has been doing this for longer than I've been alive, and I can't tell him otherwise.
I've actually talked to a couple of them, and they don't have that background. They actually literally don't have the knowledge, as far as I can tell. So we can talk about steep terrains and they'll say, well, no, it's 10 feet, horizontal feet. We only have to clear 10 feet. And I say, well, no, at 45 degrees, that would be at least 50 feet. And so, but that's what I'm saying. I actually think they don't know is maybe about 60 or 70% of the issue. And then we can go for grants once we convince them.
Right.
That's what we need to do.
I mean, the other issue is maybe not necessarily that like they don't know, but they may also be misinformed. So again, it comes back to I mentioned what is applicable in your area. They may be coming from another area where the 10 feet was the rule, right? 10 feet, for example, is the rule given to the LSEs, load serving entities, for power poles. So PG&E has to clear out 6 feet, a minimum of 6 feet around their power poles, all vegetation. But the recommendation is 10. And that's seen as like the gold standard. The reality is, like you said, if that power pole is on a really steep hill, they tend to go further than that because they know that it needs to be further. But these gentlemen working, for public works may not know that. They just know, hey, PG&E does it 10 feet, or that's what we tell them they need to do in our area. So, or East Bay Mud, or whoever, your load serving entity is for whatever municipality you have. But
well, I won't take up more time. It sounds to me like that's maybe a project for our Fire Safe Council to approach.
Yeah, well, no, but I don't mind talking to you guys about this. I mean, that's why we're here. This portion is to discuss that kind of stuff. What I would do is maybe look into, they have, the Community Wildfire Planning Center. They help communities plan their wildfire protection plans. Go to them and say, hey, look, we have, our government's interested, but they really don't know what they're doing. This isn't their expertise. What can you guys do? And they probably have way better experience dealing with difficult jurisdictions. My community after the LNU fire, it got everyone's buy-in. It was like, holy crap, we do not want to go through that again. Oakland Hills fire is a great example, right? People were all about their shake roofs until that fire happened. And then all of a sudden, everyone was ready to replace their roof on their house. Unfortunately, it may take a disaster for you guys to get their buy-in, but you guys should be able to get them to buy in if you just present the right information to them and make it easy. That's something I learned in the Marine Corps. When I went to my first sergeant with a problem, I had at least 2 solutions lined up, and I gave him what I call the illusion of choice, letting him pick out, what he wanted to do and how he wanted to solve that problem. So going to them and saying, hey, look, we can get goats, or there's some other technology available. Another great idea maybe would be, there's a company out of Morgan Hill developed a product called Komodo, and they have a retardant that can be applied to the ground, and it will last it should last through the fire season. As soon as you get about 3 inches of rain on the ground, that fire retardant is biodegradable and it'll wash away. But getting something like that applied in an area where people can't go, and if you guys can't afford to get sheep out there, is maybe another option. Komodo, I'm not endorsing them. I happened to see them at the event, saw a demonstration. But looking into something like that, like a retardant that might be applied to the ground. And And again, those retardants aren't necessarily fire, they resist fire, right? Some of them slow fires down, others can stop the fire, but most of them just slow the fire down. So be aware of that when you apply something like that to the ground. You're talking about giving your community more time to evacuate, as well as giving first responders more time to get on top of things.
Thank you.
Does it make sense to sign up as a volunteer? Yeah, if you wanted to sign up with Team Rubicon and to be able to track your time, especially if we're conducting operation or a service project in your area, that's absolutely possible. We also encourage people from other organizations to sign up with Team Rubicon because of the training we offer. A lot of organizations don't have training programs in place. However, it might be helpful. I don't know how many of you have run a chainsaw in your lives or have much experience falling trees, but coming over and going through our chainsaw program and then being able to take that back to your community and say, hey, cool, look, I know how to do this. I know how to do it safely is always an option.
Yeah, that was my question actually.
Yeah.
So it would make sense for me that I sign up for Team Rubicon. I guess just go to the website and sign up, and then I get like contact to my local entity.
Yeah. So what'll happen is you'll go to the website. There's a button that'll say join now. And when you sign up, we background check all of our volunteers. It's at no cost to you. If you want, you can pay for the background check just to help our organization, since we're donation funded. However, we will pay for it. And then that can take anywhere from a few days to a month. If you've moved around and lived a lot of places, those background checks can take a little longer because they are very thorough with them. But once that's completed and there's a class online we have called TR 101, Stepping into the Gray, that basically describes how our organization works and operates, and then kind of goes over ICS a little bit. I also recommend you guys looking into ICS, or the Incident Command System, ICS 100 and 700, if you're going to join Team Rubicon. That just gives you a really good foundational knowledge of how we operate. And then from there, there's a web portal for our volunteers called Roll Call, ROLLCALL. Roll Call is where you'll go to look for training opportunities as well as events and service projects. And then you can set your preferences to have Team Rubicon text you, call, email you, or both in regards to operations and service projects as they come up. We put out what's known as a call to action email and text message, just letting you know that in your area there's an event happening, or if there's something happening nationally and we're willing to fly you out, usually anything over 450 miles. Right now we have a mitigation project coming up in Yolo County, like Brooks, Gwinda, where the LNU fire hit. We have some properties we're going to there. And that's a great actually example, Pam. We have residents there who are, it's a lot of work that needs to be done. The work getting done is, I think, 1 or 2 properties, but it's enough work that it'll actually impact the whole community. So just an example for you there, not that we won't go out and help, but just making sure that when we're doing work on, like, let's say 1 property, that it's going to have some really good impact. And heck, honestly, if you guys approached us and we came out and said, hey, it's not, project worthy or something that, I can spin up an operation for, I've got friends with chainsaws. I might be able to come out and do the work myself, right? I've got the background and the experience. We have something we called Neighbors Helping Neighbors that we developed for COVID. Just kind of people going out and helping each other when they could. And that's kind of evolved into, like I said, guys with chainsaws going and helping their neighbor with something, or maybe your neighbor's fence fell down in a windstorm, so you go help them rebuild it. So there's always options.
Sorry,
ahead,
one
Walker.
question. So, and getting you guys out, we talked about like May 7th as a kind of date. We want to maybe get some of that stuff done. Is that realistic, or is that like
no, and unfortunately, for us to get out and help you guys, I would probably need at least 3 weeks. The reality is we already have several mitigation operations, one of them spanning the 7th. So it starts May 4th and goes till the 9th. That's the one happening in Yolo. And that's an example though, Pam. So 2 properties, but it's going to take us about 5 days to get that work done. That also is looking at the number of volunteers. We're going to have about 25 volunteers. We also look at things like infrastructure support. So if our volunteers are driving in each day, it's not a big deal. We can get them lunch and dinner usually, but if they're going to have to stay overnight, making sure we have facilities nearby that we can utilize, or places where we can set up tents in the worst case scenario. Yes, we do have our own liability insurance, Vika.
But it doesn't have to be exactly on May 7th. Can we just organize a day where you can
You guys don't, that's a national awareness day. You guys can do whatever you want, whenever you want. And I encourage you, to find days that work best for your community. That's just kind of a, if everybody did all of their wildfire mitigation day on that one day, honestly, I'd be really scared because there's way more work to be done in one day.
Yeah.
Right.
It sounds like, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Volker. I was just wondering if you could arrange a day for you guys to come. It gives an incentive to us to define all the projects that we have. You can prioritize. Let us what you can help with. We can ask for a chipper. I also have one more question on the side. There are many residents who complain about their neighbors who don't know anything about wildfire safety. Their front yards are full of junipers. Their backyards, have flammable trees. They don't know how to approach them. Is there a polite way of, do you have any letter they can hand to the resident to educate them, invite them to share the risk?
I don't know. Again, that's not an issue I've had to deal with yet. Again, I know after the wildfire conference, I was made aware of that I knew buy-in was an issue, but from a neighbor to neighbor standpoint, I don't know what the best way to approach that is. Again, some of these organizations like Community Wildfire Planning Center may have an answer for you. Another thing to look into if it gets nasty and they're just like, you know what, no, I don't care. Look at your city and county codes, right? So their weed abatement codes exist. It's a misleading title. Weed abatement isn't just about beautification. It's about wildfire risk and, protecting an area. And I will tell you, because we've done it. If you don't comply, we will send a contractor out there. They will do the work and we will bill you. And, when we get work done on our own, it's usually the lowest contract, lowest bid. But when it's work on your property, if you're paying us back, we really don't care who gets the work done. It's usually who can get it done soonest, which usually has a higher price tag. And that tends to get people's, interest when I say, hey, yeah, it's going to be about $5,000. And they're like, wait, what? It's like, oh, okay. You want to come to the table and talk? Cool. It's hopefully it doesn't get to that. I don't know. That's something maybe for you guys to discuss and look at, like you said, a letter.
We'll look into it. But about getting organized as a community and you help us. So you said you'll put us in touch with Norman and tell us how it goes. Norman would come to the neighborhood.
So again, your first step would be to identify some work to be done. That needs to be done. I know like Vika's interested. If there's work that can be identified at the school there, for example, on the property they have, or within your neighborhood, if certain areas, like certain homeowners, like, hey, yeah, look, I need this taken care of, right? Have all that together. Norman would likely come out. We would also probably have one of our saw leads come out as well, if there's any saw work that needs to be done, and determine if it's within scope. And then from there, he'll kind of decide, okay, hey, yeah, this is something we can do or something we can't. Or kind of divvy up, okay, hey, this portion of the work we can do, this we can't. We do fall trees, but if the tree's too close to a home and it's leaning over the the home, for example, we might not touch it. We might recommend that you find someone else, because it's too much of a risk and we don't want to drop a 100-foot tree on a house and create a bigger problem. So let's see.
I have a question.
Yes.
Let me ask. On the other evening when we were all Zooming, there was a comment stating that in 94803, we're made up of incorporated and unincorporated, and I think also Richmond as part of our group. That if you were part of Richmond, this did not pertain to them, to our areas, that this was mainly for the other areas. Is this the same thing? Do we still have to go to Richmond, or can we still become part of this group and and work with this group.
I'm going to defer to Sahela because that definitely sounds like a question for her.
Mikey, this group, you mean Team Rubicon or?
No, and the 9483 and the safety committee, the fire safety committee.
Oh,
And
the Fire Safe Council actually is for the entire West Contra Costa County. Don't worry about it. You can all be in it. The point is, how do we work out with different entities? That's why we wanted to have representatives from all agencies, from City of Richmond Fire Department, County Fire Department, CAL FIRE, everyone. So we have connections with them and also volunteer groups like Team Rubicon who can help us. I happened to be talking with Ed at CAL FIRE today, and he said they do contracts at like a fraction of the cost to residents. But if we cut the trees ourselves or vegetation and they take care of the rest, there is no need for sequel. If we invite them to cut the trees and vegetation, they have to have sequel process, and that may take time. So we need to consider our different options for different projects. So I'm hopeful when Norman comes, can help us, which ones are doable with Team Rubicon, which ones are not, so we can ask, for example, CAL FIRE or County Fire Department to help us with that, and we can sort things out. So the our Fire Safe Council, in my view, needs to come up with a plan and map of the projects that need to be done, and Norman can help us with that. Am I right?
Correct. He can help identify what work we're able to assist you guys with, what's within our scope, and what we won't be able to do. Again, that's why we also have usually one of our lead sawyers come out to take a look at the work to say, okay, yeah, for sure, that's something it was within scope for our sawyers. Also, that's important for us because I have to look at resource ordering. So when I plan a project, a service project or an operation, again, I'm competing sometimes with other operations in other areas. So making sure the equipment's available in our cache, making sure that I have the personnel available. Sometimes the stars align and everything goes great. Other times everything's good, but I can't get volunteers to sign up, right? Maybe a handful of my sawyers or lawyers, it's the end of the month, they're trying to get their billable hours put in. Or, it's, during COVID, we had a lot of volunteers available. A lot of people were at home. In the summer, a lot of our volunteers are first responders. So, that core group of volunteers is unavailable due to wildfire season. So it really just depends. We've had service projects like one we just did in Greenville, California. We had to push it back 4 times, unfortunately. And that really hurt us to have to do that, but it just, it wasn't in the cards. We were able to get it done eventually, and we're really happy with that. So just because we come out and can't do something right now doesn't mean we won't, commit to getting it done. It just may take some time. Like you guys, we're coming together as volunteers and we're not paid. So, being patient and understanding is really appreciated. I see Vika had another question. We don't use cranes. If you guys look up Team Rubicon, sometimes you will see some heavy equipment involved. There's some very stringent criteria because that equipment is donated and running it is very expensive on an operation. So Case, who we partner with, donates tractors and like front end loaders, as well as MTLs or CTLs, excavators. We have to pay for the fuel. And then we also have a very small group of operators who are actually qualified to run that equipment. We typically have to fly them out. So for me to get an operation involving that kind of equipment is usually at least 2 weeks worth of work. For me to justify it, I cannot have the equipment just sitting there. Were there any other questions?
So still question about Norman coming to our area. What time frame are we talking about? And if we could ask about his qualification, like he identifies the project, it needs to be done whether by Team Rubicon or someone else, or he only talks about what Team Rubicon can do.
He's only going to talk about it. So he's not going to come out and do like a wildfire assessment, like a home assessment. He's not going to do that. What he's going to do is take the work you guys have identified and say whether or not it's within our scope. We do have connections with other organizations, so we may or may not be able to recommend you somewhere else if we can't do it. But that's kind of one of the things we do is innovation. We love to find ways to get stuff done. So just because it's something we haven't done before, or you know, it's outside of our scope, we still, you know, can try and find a way to help you guys. As far as his timeline, I don't know. I don't have his calendar on me. Norman's a very busy guy. He is retired, which is really helpful. But he's also part of our international team. He's been to the Ukraine twice now already, helping out with that. He's on our field leadership team. So he helps mentor, you know, leaders within our community on incident management. So when we stand up operations, we typically have a paid staff member that goes out, is contracted to go out and help lead those new volunteer leaders who've never led an operation before. And then he's doing some, I know he's going down to TEEX, which is Texas A&M Extension, down in College Station. They're doing a disaster city event coming up, I believe, at the end of the month, and he'll be there for a week. So maybe within a week or two, worst case scenario, I might come out myself if Norman's not available. Like I said, if you guys were able to identify the work in time, I could come out sooner. I don't know if I'd be able to get a Sawyer there in time to be able to look at the work, though.
Okay, thank you very much. We are almost out of time. I always keep our guests for only an hour. Pam, could you make it quick? You're muted.
And don't worry about a rush, guys. I've got pot roast sitting in the Instant Pot. It's going to take over an hour to cook, so I plan this accordingly.
Very kind of you. Thanks.
So
Go ahead,
I have
Pam.
a dumb question. The Nfpa certified people, are they the best people, even if it costs $100 or whatever they charge, to have them come out, look at the situation, and say, okay, this is what you need? I'm probably a rubber stamp of what some of the other people on the Hill are going to need.
Mhm.
So is that the best way for me to find out what are we even looking at?
So that certification is a good certification, but what it means is that they've gone through a curriculum and met the standards. Does that mean they're the best practitioner? What's your line of work? What do you do?
I was in manufacturing and design.
And so did everyone that did manufacturing design, were they always the best at what they did?
If you go to a restaurant, does the food always taste good?
Exactly. So just because somebody has that certification, I can't promise that it's going to be the best option for you. You guys really need to look at what you're doing, you know, and figure out, is it worth it? You know,
How do we, since this is not my line of work, and I'm just now realizing how important this is, how do we even find out what is it that we need? Like, this 5-foot rule makes perfect sense, except I'm on the edge of a cliff and I need that foliage to keep the cliff from eroding. There's places where the foliage isn't there and it's at a 45-degree angle because of slough off.
Yeah.
So
there are people that this is their entire job. A great example, like, I mean, this is just me spitballing. I'm not an expert, but there are drought resistant, fire resistant plants that are used in landscapes for things like that. When we look at hills, the idea of just removing all the vegetation with a goat and some sheep scares the crap out of me, because yes, we're not going to get a wildfire racing up that hill, but when the rains finally come, and we all know they're coming again eventually, I'm going to have to go back there and deal with a landslide. So there are best practices for things like that. There are practitioners that deal with that. I'm honestly getting away from the suppression space myself and moving into the mitigation space. So I'm learning about this every day. You know, I'm trying to get to a point where I can maybe start a company that has practitioners to help communities like you guys, similar to what TR does. Because there are companies out there that are for profit, and I don't know how much they charge. I know of one in Sonoma. What is it? Madronis. Hang on, I have their cards. Sorry, here we go. Madronis Wildfire Defense. So that's, again, I'm not endorsing them at all. I just happen to know they are practitioners. There was another one. It's like Allied Fire Defense. They're down in SoCal. There are companies out there that exist. You know, do your research, look at their reviews, ask for their qualifications.
Are there good YouTube videos that basically show what the rules are, and we could just watch that and
absolutely.
go, okay?
I mean, there's the National Volunteer Fire Council has the wildfire assessment program available to you guys to go look at and do yourselves. There's HIZ training available out there. I mean, there's free resources available. You go to FACNet. FACNet is going to be one of your best resources. You guys don't need to pay to get this knowledge. It's available to you for free.
Thank you.
Pam, Marin Fire Safe, or Fire Safe Marin, I should say, .org has a zillion fabulous home hardening and fire escaping videos. And I can give you my resource list because that's what I do in part. So
we'll try to put them all online. I'll ask Preston to email me the ones that he thinks are most important, and I'll put them on our website. One more question. If we invite you to come, hopefully it will happen sometime in May. Is there a requirement for matching volunteers from our end?
No, that's typically found more in the grants. As far as Team Rubicon goes, I mean, we may need somebody to come out and meet with us. If we're doing work on private property, we would need to get waivers signed by those individuals. But as far as needing anything from you guys, manpower wise or money wise, no, there's nothing that we need from you guys.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Well, so I did mention the waivers from private properties. Cliff had asked a question about property beyond your property line, lands beyond the property line. If that is publicly owned land, then you would need to go through that jurisdiction. I have to have a waiver in order to get my volunteers to work on anyone's property. And that waiver basically says, I am not charging you for anything. We do not expect compensation, that we have our own insurance. If something happens, we're not contractors, but if something happens like to one of our volunteers, we're not going to sue you. You guys aren't going to sue us. It's a one-page liability waiver. We encourage everyone to read through it. It's not in size 7 font where you can't even read it. I mean, it's very legible and it's just basic information. If it's anything outside of that, then you need to go through that jurisdiction and have them take care of it.
Okay.
Could I follow up on that, please?
Yes.
What I was trying to say was that what you described basically is groups of people going out and doing physical work. My question was, does your work extend to maybe visiting groups of people and offering advice on a specific subject?
Not typically, no. Outreach like this meeting with you guys is one of the first in California as far as talking about fire mitigation. And I was only allowed to do that because of my background and the fact that I just recently came back from the Wildland Conference. Before this year, I probably wouldn't have been doing anything like this. We're working on doing outreach. As I mentioned in my slides, community outreach and engagement and public education is one of the bigger issues that can solve problems. Pam made it clear that people just need to be educated and learn. So if you have an issue related to wildfire mitigation, I might be able to expand upon it more with another group. If there's another issue, I don't know that we could talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, basically what a lot of us are concerned about is that we live in, I think it's RH zoning, residential hillside. And there's only 2 of those zones in Richmond. And people don't even know where the boundaries of the property are. They probably know where their own property is, but they probably don't know about the land that adjoins it, some of which appears to be, can't be, you look worried, is that okay?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I'm actually trying to look something up for you right now.
Oh, okay. I just saw the background light flashing.
Oh, closing out my window, sorry.
Yeah, so around our properties, there's swaths of land which are very steep and subject to slides and what have you, and subject to fires. And since we've lived here since 1986, we've had 2 or 3 fires and 2 or 3, they were relatively small, and 2 or 3 landslides, which were dealt with professionally and dealt with very well. But now time has gone by and the developer has disappeared over the hill and obviously palmed off ownership of the land to anyone that was fool enough to take it. We would find it very difficult to make the city, for example, deal with the problem because it's probably technically somebody else's problem. And the piece of land that Marilyn was speaking about, I believe, is almost inaccessible because there's property all the way around it. There's one fire road leading up to it, but that's blocked by vegetation and the topography and what have you. And I think we would all appreciate it if we could get somebody to, you know, give us some knowledgeable advice.
So, I mean, I think your first step is identifying, you know, the property owners. Again, if it's private property and we can, you know, I can get a waiver from that person and go out and do work that's going to affect your entire community. That's a great service project for us or an operation for us to conduct. You know, if it is, if there's houses all around, even if somebody owns the driveway, there's some kind of easement to allow access to that land for the property owner. If that roadway is blocked by vegetation, if there's no houses on there, the fire department's probably not going to enforce, you know, route clearance for evacuations, unless that was a way for you guys to evacuate. If not, then your best bet is just, again, county ordinances if you guys are in an unincorporated area, or city ordinances if you're in the incorporated areas. And then just, I mean, if you don't know who it is, having a candid conversation with them, like, you know, like we've identified, some people just don't know, you know, or a great way to sell it to them is, hey, you know, there's this land here that you haven't been maintaining and it's a wildfire risk. And if our homes burn down and that fire started on your property, that sounds like your liability too. You know, sell it to them that way, you know, but let them know, hey, look, we're willing to work with you. We've got this group of people here that's trying to mitigate these issues. We've got volunteer organizations and, you know, state and local entities that are willing to donate equipment and time to managing this problem.
Sadly, Vika, there are many 45-degree slopes in this entire valley. It's not just one, unfortunately.
Cliff, by the way, send me an email about your area. I don't know where you live, but we'll keep that in mind at the Fire Safe Council.
So I dropped a link in there from the it's off from the Office of the State Fire Marshal. So CAL FIRE, I believe they just updated this map. No, I don't know when they most recently updated, but they basically, it's a fire hazard severity zone maps. What I would recommend you guys do is go in there and look at your area and see residents as of July 1st, 2021. You know, if someone sells a home, they're required to comply with the building codes like 7A as well as fire mitigation. So 7A is in regards to home hardening. There is a loophole that allows the homeowner to pass that liability onto the purchaser. So the purchaser says, hey, I agreed to do that work myself. I have 1 year to get that work done. The reality is most organizations, like fire organizations, aren't equipped really yet to go back and do those inspections a year later. We already conduct so many inspections on a yearly basis. Most people are unaware that probably 90% of the inspections are actually self-inspections. We give you a piece of paper, you do your own inspection, you give it back to us. If we think it looks good, then we're like, cool. If not, you know, we come back out and look ourselves, but most people rate themselves really well. So then we do quality control where about 10% of those we do go check just randomly. That being said, looking at some of these high risk areas, you guys can maybe look to see if there's properties that have recently sold and making sure that they're following through with that as well. So if that land Cliff mentioned or any other land gets sold, because, you know, property value is really high right now, make sure that you guys are following up on that and that the jurisdictions are following through on, those inspections and making sure that work is getting done. Because there is legal liability in regards to that. Something else you guys should be aware, if there's anywhere where they might do a control burn. The state did change the laws recently in regards to liability for control burns. So if I am doing a control burn and it's known as a prescribed burn and it's to the benefit of the community and it does get out of hand and cause property damage, as long as I check certain boxes, I can basically, you know, walk away without really any consequences. And they did that with the best intentions. A lot of people weren't conducting these control burns or doing some of the mitigation work needed because of fear of liability. Again, there's some very strict standards they have to check to be able to, you know, be able to claim that you know, immunity from consequences, but it is there. So being aware if you know, a jurisdiction, your air quality district announces a control burn that's going to be happening, you know, just maybe follow up on that.
Very good. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Preston, very good to learn about you, your work, Team Rubicon, and all the information you provided. Let's just stay in touch, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
Absolutely.
I'm glad there are community members who are already interested to volunteer with your group.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. Like I said, sign up and then get out there, get some of that training, and then you guys can take it back to your organization.
Thank you so much for, you know, opening a window of possibilities and the way we can work together as a community, you know, organizing and doing things together. It's, I mean, just giving us the idea of doing these projects.
Well, I can tell you guys, you know, my experience on the LNU fire started at like 10 o'clock in the morning next to Lake Berryessa. We had a vegetation fire that started. We left the scene, Cal Fire took over, and we were told, hey, we're good here. And later on, about 10 o'clock that night, it merged with the, well, it had merged with the LNU complex and became a much larger issue. We ended up losing 2 residents. PG&E lineman also died while responding to that fire. He had a heart attack. And so, you know, I just think about that and I carry that with me every day. And, you know, any opportunity I can get to help proactive residents such as yourself, you know, not have to go through something like that, but also, you know, keep first responders like myself from having to go through something like that again. It means a lot to me. So, you know, the impact you guys are having is intangible. You guys won't know, unfortunately, but it's there. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's just stay in touch.